The next step in initializing a new card game is basically to shuffle the cards. In order to do that programmatically, we need to generate, in this particular case, a set of 60 random numbers. And as it says here, this represents 60 cards in random order. And again, our deck of cards has 60 cards. If you were dealing an ordinary deck, you would just set that number to 52. So, how do we generate random numbers? Well, most programming languages contain some function that will generate a random number. Now, these random numbers are not necessarily going to be perfectly random. Very random, certainly random enough for our purposes, but if you need absolutely random numbers, there's a lot of discussion and debate about what functions to use and how to get the most random number out of a function. But PHP has a function named rand, and that's what we're going to use. Now, in earlier versions, you had to seed the function with another function called srand, but in PHP nowadays we don't need to do that anymore. So we're going to use that function, and the basic function itself generates a single random number, and it's set up so that it can create a random number between minimum and maximum values you enter. And we need a set of 60 random numbers, and they also cannot be duplicated. You can't deal the same card twice in a single deck. So you can't deal out the ace of spades or the one of metal in our Z-cycle deck. You can't deal that out twice. So we need to include this function in a code block that not only generates random numbers between 0 and 59, but also does not use the same number twice. So we need something in there that if it finds the same number is being used, it throws it out and goes through the process again until it has a set of 60 random numbers that are not duplicated. Now you might be wondering why we don't just go from 1 to 60 instead of 0 to 59. That's because we're going to use these numbers with arrays, and arrays have an index based starting in 0. So 0 is actually a number. So let's take a look down at the code and see how that works. First of all, we're going to set a flag. We're going to create a variable named flag and set it to 0, and we'll use that later as we process through all of our set of numbers looking for duplicates. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to initialize this card sequence array. Now, the reason we have to do that is if the player plays again, this array is still going to be residing in the session. So we don't want to use the same exact order we used previously. So we're going to set every value in that array to -1. And that means that as we go through the loop and set numbers, our processing through all these numbers will work properly, even if it's the second time or third time around for the user. We're going to use a for loop processing through actually 58 times, and we're going to get a random number between 0 and 59. We're going to start by using that rand function to set a random number value between 0 and 59 into this variable. Then we have to do another loop, and notice that we've simply upgraded our counter variable name from $i to $i2. And so this is going to be a for loop within a for loop. And as it says here, once a number is generated, it must be checked to see if it's already been chosen. This next loop, this one right here, is what checks to see if the number's already being used. Which number? The one we just picked. So we just picked a new number. Now we're going to check it by running through every value in there. And if any of the values in there are exactly equal to the newly picked value, we're going to set the flag. We're going to set the flag to 1. So the very next thing we do is check. Is the flag set to 1? If not, then the current array card sequence value is going to become the newly chosen random number. Or else, if the flag is set, we have to set the counter back 1 so that we will go through that same array card sequence value again, and then we just continue processing. So whatever we do, we only use the flag equals 1 right here. If it equals 1, then we set the counter back and do that number again. We throw out the number and pick another random number. Now, you might think, well, gee, you could get stuck in a loop and never get out of it, but it doesn't actually work that way. In practice, it will eventually find a random number that you haven't used. Even if it's only 1, it might have to do that little process 60 times at the very end, but it will find unique random numbers for all of them. So whatever the outcome is in any of those cases, we always set the flag back to 0, and then we're done. And we always register or read-register array card sequence. So it's brand new every time around. And that's how we use the RAND function to shuffle our cards.